Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. Manufacturers have actually been at the forefront of a lot of innovation. They've adopted a lot of different strategies, and we're probably one of the first organizations and industries to connect their own systems to others, and yet there's still a lot of disruption going on. Can you kind of walk us through where we are now with the manufacturing industry and what kinds of challenges they're finding in this new digital-first world?
I think today's manufacturers really face a major challenge in terms of supporting their global operations. So they have manufacturing plants all over the world, and in parallel with that, they have a number of digital technologies that they have to embrace as part of their day-to-day operations. So over the last 12 months, for example, we've seen a lot of press activity around 3D printing. So how can manufacturers adopt 3D printing technologies in their plants around the world? Being able to adopt more advanced robotics environments within their manufacturing environments as well. And then finally, the biggest digital disruptor at this moment in time is really the Internet of Things. So CIOs around the world, especially in the manufacturing sector, are starting to embrace the IoT, starting to define their strategies and how they're going to be rolling out IoT-related strategies, in particular to how they improve the manufacturability of their goods.
Can you give us an example of how this is actually working in the manufacturing industry? I mean, where are you seeing the adoption of Internet of Things, and how is that applying to, say, an old school business model?
So, for example, one European Tier 1 automotive supplier, large German automotive supplier, has actually built what they regard as a virtual supply chain. So what they're able to do, as manufactured goods come off the end of the production line, they have a number of connected devices, albeit the forklift trucks, for example, taking the goods off the end of the production line. They go through the factory gates, they go onto the back of a lorry, and that lorry itself is also connected to their virtual supply chain environment. So they have managed to obtain complete end-to-end visibility of the shipment as it leaves the factory and when it goes through the customer's gate at the other end. And that end-to-end visibility is a key benefit of today's manufacturing operations, and in terms of improving customer satisfaction levels as well.
And very key to that is, of course, their data strategy. Data has become extremely important to very many industries, and of course, manufacturing is no stranger to that. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of data that they are acquiring, what kinds of information are they most interested in, and how are they applying that to their business?
So there are about 3 or 4 stages where I certainly believe there's, in terms of reuse of information across the manufacturing supply chain. So for example, if we take the supply chain itself, being able to understand trends in terms of shipments, for example, what kind of transactions are flowing across the network, how can we actually dive down and understand what type of transactions are flowing to a particular trading partner, which may be located in China, may be located in Europe. So having this 30,000-foot view of how trading partners or how companies are interacting with their trading partners is incredibly valuable. If we then move around to, for example, the shop floor, so companies may need to get a better appreciation of how their machines are performing on the shop floor, maybe as part of some form of predictive maintenance scenario. So the last thing you want is a production line going down because one of your robotic work cells has suddenly decided to not work properly. So being able to predict when a component is likely to fail and being able to analyze that information will certainly ensure that production lines are available 24/7. And then the next stage, being able to distribute goods to a customer. So being able to work closely with your third-party logistics providers, for example, being able to monitor the performance of, for example, a DHL of this world or a FedEx, and making sure they're actually delivering on time to customers. What are the trends associated with making sure those goods get delivered at the right time, the right location? And then finally into the aftermarket service and support area. So once a piece of equipment goes into the field, how can we actually proactively maintain it to make sure that it has maximum uptime in the field, whether it's a generator set, whether it's a jet engine underneath an Airbus or a Boeing wing, for example. How can we actually make sure that we can predict when a component is going to fail and actually maximize the uptime of that piece of equipment?
For managers to make the right kinds of decisions, to ask the right kinds of questions, they have to be very sensitive to the types of analytics that you're getting. Where are you seeing the trends going in the types of information that they're trying to analyze, and what kinds of things do they often tell you are their pain points when it comes to analytics? I mean, what kinds of things do they need from an analytics tool set?
I think the two biggest areas, as I sort of previously highlighted, one around trading partner analytics, and the second area is around predictive analytics. So taking the first one first, if you think of our trading grid infrastructure, which is our global B2B network to allow companies to trade electronically with each other, so there is a requirement there to be able to mine the information that's flowing across our trading grid infrastructure. We're processing around 16 billion transactions per year. Now, having an analytics capability to be able to analyze those 16 billion transactions really quickly in real time, so that you can actually make a business decision in terms of what you can do with the information flowing across that network. And then on the predictive maintenance piece, being able to ensure that you've got this maximum uptime. You may have historical data of how a piece of equipment has performed in the last 5 years. Well, how is it performing this year? How does it compare with previous years? So being able to predict when a component is going to fail, and being able to take that analytics information and basically being able to ensure that your equipment is or has maximum uptime to support your manufacturing operation.
Now, every industry or every organization has got to go at their own speed, but there are some barriers to adoption. What are they at this point?
I think if we take the Internet of Things as one key example, one of the key barriers at the moment are other IT projects within the business. So the number one project on the agenda of many CIOs today is maybe an ERP implementation, whether it's SAP, whether it's Oracle. You can always guarantee that an ERP project will get the most IT resources within a business. Now, that potentially could leave other IT projects exposed within the manufacturing operation.
Sure.
So this is when companies start to think about outsourcing maybe their B2B infrastructure, for example. But also, companies, I certainly believe on the manufacturing side, companies are starting to appreciate the value of analytics, the ability to make real-time decisions. And I certainly think the trend over the last few years with big data analytics and CIOs suddenly starting to realise that, well, we've actually got a valuable set of information here. What if we could actually analyse it and react upon it in real time to improve the way in which we actually make decisions across the business?
Are there certain best practices that sort of are across the board in terms of the industry? Are they talking to each other about how they're performing these things?
Yeah, so in terms of the manufacturing sector, and again particularly on the supply chain side, there are industry bodies that support both the manufacturing industry, the high-tech industry. They do get together, and analytics has certainly been one of the discussion points within these forums. And even though they're actually competing against each other, there is an element of co-opetition. So in terms of the benefits of the industry in general, they are keen to work together to try and address, well, how do we actually apply big data analytics, or analytics in general, to the automotive industry, for example? How do we apply it to the high-tech industry? And these companies will work together to define standards and new best ways and processes of working together if they have to do so.
Talk us through sort of the projection then for the next, say, 5 to 10 years. What are we looking at in terms of the innovations that will be coming because of these new sets of data, the way that they're analyzing it? How will that impact the industry going forward?
I think we're starting to see some examples today, even in the automotive industry. If you think of the telematics connectivity that today's cars, such as the Tesla Model S, has, being able to remotely send information from the car directly back to the dealer. And if you align that with a manufacturing production line, the ability to have a complete autonomous, self-thinking production line. So rather than the actual production engineers or the assemblers on the shop floor being able to decide, well, this product is going to this machine next, what we'll actually have is the actual product itself deciding what the next step in the manufacturing process will be. So being able to understand autonomously, as the product goes down the production line, what it's going to be doing, what process is going to be applied to it as it goes down the production line. And companies are starting to think that way, in that particular way already.
And that translates to better customer experience.
It's better customer experience, but also you're actually building intelligent products. You're starting to build intelligence into the products as they move down the production line. And of course, once you've got the intelligence built into the products, you can then use that in the field once it goes into service, and then you can tap into it. So what's actually happening to the product in the field? You've got all the sensors that are built into it. How's that going to impact the performance? How can we actually react to that from a maintenance standpoint as well?
And if it was up to you, how would you like this to all pan out? What would be the optimal experience from a consumer standpoint, or perhaps even from a manufacturing organization standpoint?
I think for me, if I put my consumer hat on, I want to be able to go to a website. I want to be able to define what my end product is going to look like, what it's going to consist of, if it's a car, for example. And I would expect that car to be delivered exactly to my requirements from the information I provided into the portal. And I think that whole consumer engagement is an area that manufacturers are very keen to work on. And I've certainly noticed over the last 12 to 24 months that both the automotive industry and the high-tech industry is becoming increasingly consumer-driven. There was the stories earlier last year of both Apple and Google developing in-car connectivity solutions so that the consumer can get in their car and their phone would automatically sync up with the in-car entertainment system. And you could argue, well, is the consumer actually choosing the car based on the colour, based on the specification, or is it actually now the phone or the communications device is actually deciding what kind of car they're going to be purchasing? So the connected consumer is actually changing the way now in which consumers and buyers of vehicles in particular are actually choosing the type of car they potentially will get in the future.